On the opening night of this war, camera footage from inside Tehran caught something nobody fully expected. Iranian MiG-29 fighters, jets built by the Soviet Union before most of their own pilots were even born, scrambling into the sky over the capital while American and Israeli missiles were already inbound. Months later, we learned that while those jets were in the air trying to defend Iranian territory, a separate, much quieter operation was running in parallel, one aimed not at American aircraft or Israeli pilots, but directly at the President of the United States. Two entirely different kinds of warfare, unfolding on completely different timelines, both traced back to the same government. Let's walk through both of these threads in order, with the sourcing behind every piece of it. Let's start with that opening night, because it sets up everything that follows and gives you the baseline every later development in this story gets measured against. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched a coordinated large-scale military assault on Iran, an operation that targeted key leadership and military facilities and killed Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. According to reporting from Military Watch magazine, footage from the Iranian capital confirmed the scrambling of MiG-29A fighter aircraft guarding the city almost immediately after the strikes began. The publication noted several possible explanations for why Iran would send aging fourth-generation fighters into the air against an opponent flying some of the most advanced aircraft on the planet, that drones or other slow-moving targets may have been approaching Tehran, that the scramble was meant to raise morale among Iranian forces and civilians watching from the ground, or that the jets were being repositioned to dispersed or better fortified locations before they could be caught and destroyed on the runway. Here's the detail that actually matters most from that first night, and it's one worth treating carefully because getting the sourcing right on this specific point shapes how much weight you should give everything that follows it. A report circulating shortly afterward claimed an Iranian MiG-29 had shot down an Israeli F-15EX Eagle II using a Soviet-designed R-27 air-to-air missile. If true, that would have marked the first time Iran's Air Force managed to inflict a significant air-to-air defeat against a technologically superior opponent in this entire conflict. I want to be direct about the sourcing here, because this specific claim was never officially confirmed by either Iran or Israel, and it originated from social media reporting rather than a verified military statement. I'm flagging it because it circulated widely in the opening hours of the war, not because I can confirm it happened exactly as described. What is independently confirmed, and this is a genuinely historic moment in aviation history, happened about a week later. On March 4th, 2026, an Israeli Air Force F-35I, known in Israeli service as the Adir, shot down an Iranian Yakovlev Yak-130 over the skies of Tehran. The Israel Defense Forces confirmed this directly. According to reporting that traced the aircraft's origin through leaked defense documents, this marked the first confirmed air-to-air kill by an F-35 in the history of the aircraft's operational service anywhere in the world. That's a genuinely significant milestone, not because the aircraft it destroyed was particularly advanced. The Yak-130 is primarily a trainer aircraft with light attack capability, but because it's the first time in this entire aircraft program's history that an F-35 has recorded a confirmed kill against another aircraft in the air. If you're wondering how Iran even had Russian-built aircraft flying combat sorties against a technologically dominant enemy in the first place, stick with me, because that thread runs deeper than most coverage of this war has actually gone, and it starts years before the first missile of this conflict was ever fired. According to investigative reporting from United 24 Media, which reviewed leaked defense documents, Russia has been quietly arming Iran's air force for years, well before this war ever started. The earliest contract referenced in those documents, numbered R/19K41768, dates back to June 10, 2021, and covers the production of Su-35 fighter jets and their associated combat components. Reuters separately reported that a major contract for 48 advanced Su-35 combat aircraft was formalized, with deliveries initially scheduled for the 2026 to 2028 window. Iran's first Yak-130 combat trainers, which double as light attack aircraft capable of carrying up to 3 tons of munitions, were delivered starting in September of 2023, years before this conflict began. So when that Yak-130 went down over Tehran in early March, it wasn't some emergency wartime improvisation. It was a plane from a training and light attack program Russia had already been running with Iran for over 2 years. And that Russian pipeline hasn't stopped since the war started. It's arguably accelerated. Reporting from Kiev Post, citing Military Watch magazine, indicates Russia has reportedly completed production of the first batch of 20 Su-35 fighters ordered by Iran, built at Russia's Komsomolsk-on-Amur aviation plant, with deliveries potentially beginning sometime in 2026, though infrastructure damage at Hamadan Air Base from earlier strikes may be delaying that specific deployment. Separate flight tracking analysis documented by Defense Security Asia found at least 5 Russian Il-76 heavy military transport aircraft landing in Tehran within a 48-hour window earlier this year. an airlift tempo that analysts described as exceeding routine bilateral defense cooperation, and instead reflecting what they called crisis-driven surge logistics. Multiple assessments cited in that same reporting converged on the likelihood that what Russia has actually been delivering on these flights goes beyond just aircraft, air defense sustainment equipment, electronic warfare gear, and missile and radar electronics, exactly the kind of sensor and detection technology Iran's forces have shown clear vulnerabilities in throughout this conflict. So even as CENTCOM has spent months destroying Iranian aircraft, missile stockpiles, and air defense infrastructure on the ground, Moscow has been working an entirely separate supply line to keep replenishing exactly what's being destroyed, and apparently reinforcing the underlying sensor and detection systems those replacement aircraft would need to actually function effectively in contested airspace. That March 4th shootdown wasn't an isolated event either. It was part of an escalating pattern of air-to-air engagements that Wikipedia's own dedicated tracking of aviation losses during this war has documented in detail. On March 1st, just 2 days after the war began, the IDF said it had destroyed 2 Iranian fighter jets that were sitting ready for takeoff before they ever got off the ground. That same day, footage circulated showing the moment Iran intercepted and shot down an American MQ-9 Reaper drone, an early sign that Iran's air defenses, degraded as they were, still had teeth. By March 18th, an Iranian Bell 2-14 helicopter had been destroyed in an Israeli airstrike on Sanandaj Airport in Iran's Kurdistan province. The following day, March 19th, an American F-35 Lightning II was damaged by suspected Iranian ground fire during a combat mission, forcing an emergency landing at a U.S. airbase, with the pilot suffering shrapnel wounds but surviving. 2 days after that, on March 21st, an Iranian Chengdu J-7, one of those aging Chinese-built fighters we mentioned earlier, was destroyed in a strike on Shahid Sadughi Airport in Yazd. By March 20th, according to an Australian Financial Review report cited in that same tracking, the United States had lost at least 16 aircraft of various types since the war began, a number that includes both combat losses and non-combat incidents, a figure worth sitting with, given how routinely American air superiority in this conflict gets treated as total and uncontested in casual coverage. One of the more tragic entries on that list has nothing to do with enemy fire at all. A KC-135 Stratotanker crashed in Iraq following a mid-air collision, killing all 6 crew members aboard, a loss that deserves to be named plainly rather than folded silently into a combat statistic. So even setting aside the deliberate air-to-air engagements, this war has been costly in the air in ways that don't always make it into the daily strike briefings, mechanical failures, friendly fire, and mid-air collisions sitting right alongside the confirmed combat losses on both sides. Quick pause here, because I want this to actually land before we shift to the second half of this story. Iran started this war flying Soviet-era MiG-29s that predate the collapse of the USSR, alongside a scattered mix of American F-14 Tomcats bought before the 1979 revolution, French Mirages, and Chinese Chengdu J-7s. Analysts at Forbes have been blunt about the state of that fleet, writing that even complete, fast-track delivery of every piece of Russian hardware Iran has ordered and paid for wouldn't be enough to fully revitalize a conventional air force that's become antiquated after decades of neglect and sanctions. And yet that same aging force has still managed to get jets into the air against some of the most advanced combat aircraft on Earth, has reportedly claimed at least one contested air-to-air kill, and has kept receiving fresh Russian hardware throughout an active war specifically designed to prevent exactly that kind of resupply. Now let's shift to the second half of this story, because while all of that was happening in the sky over Tehran, a completely different kind of operation was unfolding, one that had nothing to do with fighter jets at all. In early July, according to reporting from the Wall Street Journal, Israel shared intelligence with the United States indicating that Iran had developed a new plan to assassinate President Donald Trump. The report cited people familiar with the matter and noted the intelligence marked the latest development in a series of threats Iran has directed at Trump, going back to the January 2020 strike that killed IRGC Quds Force Commander Qasem Soleimani in Baghdad. On July 11th, U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee confirmed the substance of that reporting directly, telling Fox News that, quote, Israeli intelligence tipped off our side, the president and our officials, that there was a very specific plot that was designed to take out President Trump. That's about as close to an on-the-record confirmation as you're going to get from a sitting American ambassador on a story like this one. Trump himself addressed the threat directly during a press conference at the NATO summit in Ankara on July 8th, standing in front of international media rather than behind closed doors, saying, quote, they want to take out the U.S. leader, me. I'm on whatever list. I saw this morning I'm on every single one of their lists. He added that he'd been lucky so far, but that luck might not last very long. That's a remarkably candid public acknowledgement from a sitting president, made in front of international media at a formal summit, not in a private briefing. Here's important context that shapes how seriously intelligence officials are treating this specific report. Context that separates long-standing rhetoric from a genuinely fresh warning. According to the Times of Israel's coverage, Iran has been publicly pledging to assassinate Trump since 2020, and those calls have featured prominently in the ongoing mourning commemorations for Khamenei, who was killed at the start of this war. The journal specifically noted that mourners attending Khamenei's funeral in Mashhad displayed a banner reading, quote, "We will kill Trump," and that attendees chanted for his death during the ceremony. 2 U.S. Officials separately told Israel's Channel 12 that some of the underlying intelligence related to general dialogue within Iran's networks rather than a single, fully operationalized plan, while still noting, importantly, that Israel had provided similar warnings about Iran and Iran-linked terror groups over the course of the past year. So there's a real distinction worth understanding here between broad, ongoing intent, which is well documented and long-standing, and a specific, actionable plot, which is what this particular round of intelligence sharing was reportedly about. That 2024 plot, for context, led to real criminal charges. A man named Asif Merchant was arrested on July 12th of that year, just as he was loading his luggage into a ride to the airport on a journey that, according to reporting at the time, could have taken him either to his wife and children in Iran or to a different wife and children in his native Pakistan. Over weeks of secretly recorded conversations with a federal informant, Merchant had confided that he'd come to America specifically to arrange the assassination of what an FBI affidavit described only as, quote, "a political person, working under direction from an official inside Iran's Revolutionary Guard." The identity of that intended target was never explicitly stated by Merchant or by his handler, at least not in anything that became public through official channels, though a leaked document later posted online by a SI senator connected the case to the broader wave of threats against Trump that year. It's worth noting, for the sake of accuracy, that federal authorities found no evidence connecting Iran to either of the two men who separately attempted to physically attack Trump that same year, the shooter in Pennsylvania or the man apprehended at a Florida golf course, even though the golf course suspect had expressed some sympathetic interest in Iran in his own past writings. Those cases remain separate from the confirmed Iran-directed Merchant plot. And it's important not to blur them together just because they happened around the same period, since doing so would overstate what's actually been proven and understate the significance of the case that has genuinely been confirmed. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told reporters that the leader of the Iranian unit behind that earlier 2024 plot had been hunted down and killed as part of the broader campaign against Iran this year. Hegseth's exact words were, quote, "Iran tried to kill President Trump, and President Trump got the last laugh." He specifically clarified that eliminating this individual wasn't the stated objective of the broader military operation, but that ensuring the people responsible for that earlier plot were included on the target list had been a deliberate decision made along the way. If you're keeping track of the pattern here, this is now at least the third distinct assassination threat against Trump tied back to Iran that's become public, the 2024 Merchant case, ongoing general threats referenced throughout the current war, and now this new specific plot revealed by Israeli intelligence in July. That's not a single isolated incident. That's a sustained multi-year campaign that's continued even through an active shooting war between the two countries, a war that, by any conventional measure, Iran has been losing badly the entire time. And the threat hasn't stayed limited to intelligence chatter and funeral banners. According to reporting from NextGov/FCW, the U.S., the Secret Service is currently examining a video that appears to have been produced by Iranian operatives specifically designed to identify assassination opportunities against Trump, including what the video presents as motorcade routes used by his protective details in Florida and New York. That report notes the video was sent to the outlet by a U.S. source and surfaced just days after Trump appeared publicly at the FIFA World Cup final in New Jersey on July 19th. Think about the operational specificity implied there. Motorcade routes in 2 different states, tied to a sitting president's actual real-world movements, not vague threats or symbolic rhetoric. If you sit with the timing of that World Cup appearance for a second, it tells you something important about the gap between the threat picture intelligence agencies are working with and the reality of a sitting president's public schedule. Trump appeared on a stage in front of a packed international stadium presenting the World Cup trophy to Spain roughly a week after Israeli intelligence had already flagged a specific Iranian assassination plot to U.S. officials, and just days before the Secret Service began examining a video apparently mapping his own motorcade routes. Public life for a head of state doesn't simply pause because a serious, specific threat has been confirmed through intelligence channels, which is exactly why the layered security response we've walked through today, the older, more proven Air Force One, the direct ambassador level confirmation, the active Secret Service video investigation, matters as much as it does. There's a physical, visible sign of just how seriously these threats have been taken that's worth walking through too. because it shows this isn't just intelligence chatter being treated abstractly behind closed doors. Earlier in this war, when Iran had publicly threatened to target Air Force One directly, the Secret Service made the decision to put Trump on the older Boeing VC-25A, the aircraft most people recognize as the classic baby blue Air Force One, rather than the newer aircraft that had more recently entered the fleet. The reasoning at the time was straightforward. The older jet had been through decades of trials and had a fully proven track record of protecting a sitting president under real threat conditions, while the newer aircraft hadn't yet accumulated that same operational history. That's an actual physical decision, which aircraft the President of the United States personally flies on, being shaped directly by intelligence about Iranian threats, well before this specific July plot was even exposed. It tells you the assassination threat thread running through this war isn't a new development that suddenly appeared in July. It's been actively shaping real security decisions since much earlier in the conflict. Let's talk about the strategic split happening here, because I think it's the single most important thing to understand about this entire story. And it's the thread that ties everything else we've covered directly together. According to that same Wall Street Journal reporting, the intelligence about this new assassination plot emerged at a moment when Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu have taken visibly different approaches toward Iran in the weeks following last month's ceasefire attempt. Netanyahu has favored maintaining continuous military pressure on Tehran, while Trump has, at various points, sought to preserve whatever version of a ceasefire could hold. Despite that reported difference in strategic preference, Netanyahu's office confirmed the two leaders spoke by phone and agreed to continue close coordination, which tells you that even amid disagreement over pacing and approach, both governments are treating the assassination intelligence as serious enough to require direct leader-to-leader coordination, rather than routine intelligence sharing through normal channels. That's a meaningful signal in itself. Disagreements over strike tempo and ceasefire terms are one thing, but a credible threat against a sitting president is apparently significant enough to bridge that gap immediately, at the highest possible level, rather than being routed through the usual intelligence liaison channels both countries rely on for lower priority matters. Here's what I think ties these two threads: the jets scrambling over Tehran and the assassination plot exposed months later, together into one coherent picture of how Iran has actually been fighting this entire war from the very first night onward. On the conventional side, Iran's air force has been getting steadily degraded for months, aging MiGs and Yak-130s going down against superior American and Israeli technology, even while Russia keeps quietly resupplying replacement aircraft through an active airlift. That's a fight Iran is, by nearly every measurable metric, losing in the conventional sense. But running alongside that losing conventional fight is a completely different track, unconventional, asymmetric, and specifically targeted at individual American and Israeli leaders rather than military assets. A track that doesn't require air superiority, doesn't require modern fighter jets, and doesn't show up in CENTCOM's nightly strike briefings at all. Think about how differently those two tracks get measured too, because that's part of what makes comparing them so difficult for anyone trying to assess how this war is actually going, rather than just how it looks on any given night's strike briefing. Air combat produces immediate, countable, verifiable outcomes. A jet either gets shot down or it doesn't, and within days, you generally have satellite imagery, official statements, or wreckage confirming exactly what happened. An assassination plot doesn't work that way at all. It can sit dormant for years, get quietly disrupted without ever becoming public, or continue developing completely undetected until the exact moment it either succeeds or fails, with no wreckage, no satellite image, and often no public confirmation at all until years after the fact, if ever. That asymmetry in visibility means the public record we've walked through today, the WSJ report, Huckabee's confirmation, the Secret Service investigating a motorcade video, likely represents only the plots that got caught and became public, not necessarily the full scope of what's actually been attempted or planned over the past several years by a government with a well-documented multi-decade track record on exactly this front. That's a genuinely important distinction for understanding how this war might actually end, or fail to end, no matter how many more nights of strikes get added to the total. A country can lose every single air battle, watch its fighter jets get shot down one after another, and still maintain the capability to pursue exactly the kind of targeted, individual threat that a Secret Service motorcade route video represents. Conventional military dominance, the kind the United States and Israel have demonstrated repeatedly throughout this conflict, doesn't automatically translate into eliminating that second track, because it operates through entirely different channels, human networks, operatives already inside target countries, sympathizers, and years of patient planning that don't depend on having a single functioning fighter jet anywhere in the country. Let's talk about what this means for how the rest of this war might unfold, because I think it reframes a question a lot of coverage has been asking incorrectly from the very start of this conflict. The question isn't simply whether the United States and Israel can maintain air superiority over Iran, because by every account we've covered today, they clearly already have it, and have had it since nearly the opening night of this conflict. The more important question is whether military dominance in the air actually addresses the specific, individually targeted threat that assassination plots represent. And based on everything confirmed publicly so far, sustained strikes on Iranian air bases, missile silos, and command centers haven't stopped that second track from continuing to develop, evolve, and, according to the Secret Service's own reported investigation, produce genuinely specific, actionable material as recently as this month, which is precisely why this story deserves ongoing attention rather than a single news cycle. There's a historical echo worth naming here too, because this exact pattern, overwhelming conventional military dominance paired with a persistent, unresolved assassination and targeted killing threat, isn't unique to this specific war. It's the same basic dynamic that's defined the entire US-Iran relationship going back to the 2020 Soleimani strike that keeps getting referenced throughout this story. The United States eliminated one of Iran's most senior military commanders in a single, precisely executed operation, a total conventional and intelligence success by any measure, and Iran's answer wasn't a matching conventional response. It was years of sustained, patient, individually targeted retaliation, plotting against the man who ordered that strike. 6 years later, with an entire additional war layered on top of that original grievance, the same basic pattern is still playing out. Dominance in the air, persistence on the assassination track, running in parallel, rather than one canceling out the other. I want to be careful and precise about what's actually confirmed here versus what remains uncertain, because a story with stakes this high deserves that precision. The scrambling of Iranian MiG-29s on the opening night of the war is confirmed through independent reporting and video footage. The confirmed F-35 kill of an Iranian Yak-130 on March 4th is directly confirmed by the Israel Defense Forces themselves. The Russian arms pipeline to Iran, both before and during this war, is documented through multiple independent outlets citing leaked defense contracts and flight tracking data. The existence of a new, specific Iranian assassination plot against Trump is confirmed on the record by a sitting U, Hess ambassador, and reported by the Wall Street Journal citing people familiar with the matter. What remains less certain is the exact operational status of that plot right now, whether it's been fully neutralized, is still active, or has evolved since the intelligence was first shared. And neither the White House nor Israeli officials have publicly released additional details, clarifying that specific question as of this recording. I also want to flag one specific piece of reporting that I chose not to treat as confirmed fact throughout this breakdown, because it matters for how you weigh everything else here. The claim that an Iranian MiG-29 shot down an Israeli F-15X on the opening night of the war has never been officially confirmed by either government, and it originated from social media rather than a verified military statement. I included it because it was genuinely part of the story that circulated in those first chaotic hours. And understanding what claims were floating around, confirmed or not, is part of understanding how this war has actually been covered and perceived in real time. But I don't want you walking away thinking that specific claim carries the same evidentiary weight as, say, the IDF's own direct confirmation of the Yak-130 shoot-down 3 days later. Those are two very different categories of claim, and conflating them would be exactly the kind of sloppiness a story like this one can't afford. The same rigor applies to the merchant case too, worth restating plainly. Federal prosecutors secured that conviction through weeks of recorded conversations and a documented FBI affidavit, which puts it on much firmer evidentiary ground than a single social media claim about a dogfight nobody has released footage of. So here's the question I want to leave you with. Given that Iran's conventional air force has been steadily losing nearly every engagement since the opening night of this war, while its unconventional targeted threats against individual leaders appear to have continued developing right through the summer, do you think sustained military pressure on Iran's conventional capabilities actually reduces the country's ability to pursue asymmetric threats like this one? Or do you think those two tracks are essentially disconnected from each other, meaning Iran could lose this war in the air completely and still retain, or even sharpen, its capability on the assassination and targeted threat side? Put your honest rate in the comments, because I think this is one of the more genuinely underexamined questions in the entire conflict, and I want to know what you're seeing that the mainstream coverage of this war keeps missing. Before I wrap up, one more honest note. I've used the word exposed in the framing of this story because that's an accurate description of what happened. Israeli intelligence surfaced a specific plot that Iran had not itself acknowledged publicly, and U.S. officials confirmed it on the record. I want to be equally clear that I can't independently verify Iran's internal planning beyond what's been reported by these outlets, and none of the sourcing available describes the plot's current status in enough detail for me to tell you with confidence whether it's been fully stopped. Treat that specific piece as an open, ongoing story rather than a closed one, because based on everything published so far, it genuinely still is. Thank you for sticking with a story this layered all the way through. It's easy to watch fighter jets scramble over a capital city and think that's the whole war, the missiles, the radar, the dogfights. What the story actually shows is that the more dangerous thread running underneath all of it may never involve a single aircraft at all. Stay sharp. Keep tracking how conventional and unconventional threats develop in parallel rather than assuming one measures the other. And I'll bring you the next update the moment there's something real and verified to report. One last thought before you go. Every strike package, every downed jet, every satellite image of a destroyed airbase in this war gets measured, counted, and reported almost immediately. The assassination track we've walked through today doesn't work on that same visible timeline. It can take years to surface if it surfaces publicly at all. That mismatch between what's easy to see and count versus what's genuinely dangerous but stays hidden until a Secret Service investigation or an ambassador's on-record confirmation forces it into daylight is worth remembering the next time a headline about this war focuses entirely on a single night's strike totals. The scoreboard everyone's watching may not be the one that actually determines how this ends. Sources referenced in this script: Military Watch magazine, MiG-29s fly over Tehran as Israel and you. S launch large-scale attack. February 28, 2026. Pravda NATO reporting on the disputed claim of an Iranian MiG-29 downing an Israeli F-15EX. February 28, 2026. Flagged here as unconfirmed by either government. United 24 media. Russia quietly armed Iran's air force for years. Leaked files reveal. Confirming the Israeli Air Force F-35I's shoot-down of an Iranian Yak-130 on March 4, 2026. United 24 media. What weapons Russia supplied to Iran ahead of the 2026 U.S.-Israeli strike. Kiev Post. Russia builds first 20 Su-35 warplanes for Iran. July 3, 2026, citing Military Watch magazine. Defense Security Asia. 5th Russian Il-76 lands in Iran in 48 hours. Forbes. Russian Mi-28s and Su-35s won't revitalize Iran's dilapidated military. February 18, 2026. The Wall Street Journal reporting on the new Iranian assassination plot against President Trump, cited via LifeSet, Times of Israel, France 24, and RVM News, all published July 10, 11, 2026. Red State, Iran's very specific plot to assassinate Trump foiled by warning from Israeli intelligence, citing you. S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee, July 11, 2026. AOL News via ABC, U.S. killed Iranian leader behind Trump assassination plot, Hegseth says. Global News, 3 charged in alleged Iranian plot to kill Americans, including Trump, on the 2024 ISIF merchant case. NextGov, IFCW. Secret Service is examining apparent Iranian video outlining Trump motorcade routes. Assassination opportunities, July 2026.